Black Thought is an MC who is very well known for being a member of The Roots. The Roots is one of the biggest and most consistent hip-hop groups of all time. Gotta get working on a worst to best for them one day. That'd be pretty good. I feel as though if you're a hip-hop head, you know The Roots at this point. You know who Black Thought is. He's a legendary MC, one of the best to ever do it, I think anyway. And I think a lot of people who love The Roots and know their music well would agree that his wordplay, his intelligence is just beyond and above most rappers out there. And earlier this year, he released his solo EP, Streams of Thought Volume 1, with the producer who is also a legendary name in the hip-hop world, Ninth Wonder. One of those cases where, like, for a hip-hop head, like a classical, old head, hip-hop lover, this was like a dream come true. Two legendary names coming together to make an EP. Now, unfortunately for me, I just thought it ended up being alright. It wasn't anything I felt like I wanted to return to. Black Thought was rapping his ass off. Like he was the prime guy for that EP for me. Like, he stole the show. His rhyming, his wordplay, his flows, everything about him was what I was gravitating towards on that EP. Now, Ninth Wonder did his thing. He did a good job with the beats, the production. It was very nice, soulful and jazzy, but it just didn't really match up to Black Thought's rapping, like, honestly. It was a weird case for me because, like, this is the kind of collaboration that you'd expect to be amazing, and yet it just kind of ended up being okay. Ninth Wonder was sort of playing secondary role to Black Thought's, like, higher power, if you will. However, for Volume 2, we do not have Ninth Wonder producing. We do in fact have Salaam Remi, who I think is probably a lesser known name in the hip hop world, although he has worked with artists like Fugees and Nas in the past. But I don't think he has that same brand of a name that people would instantly recognize. And surprisingly, I think this is actually quite a lot better than Volume 1, for me anyway. I mean, Black Thought is doing his thing again, he's rapping so well, but I just think the production works way more in his favor than it did on Volume 1. The production is way more varied. You're actually getting Black Thought rapping differently from track to track as opposed to just kind of rapping his ass off the whole way through. You're getting better songs, you're getting better detailed production that has a bit more to it than it did before. Rather than having to keep up with Black Thought as a rapper who's just constantly going in and in and in, you kind of get more of an understanding of where he's coming from. You're getting a bit more of him as a person as opposed to this like robotic rapper who's just kind of going on and on and on. It feels like more of a bit of a tangible release for me, and I just think it ended up working in its favor rather than having these two huge names come together and it ended up making one outshine the other. Topically, you're getting that usual conscious rap from Black Thought, but this time around he's going a bit more introspective, I think, on here. I think what the Volume 1 was more of a bar fest, whereas I think this one you're kind of getting a deeper look into the topics that he's going in on. Like on the track Fentanyl, which is of course about the opioid crisis and drugs, and he's basically just talking about how, you know, drugs actually aren't something that you should be glorifying. You know, it's not cool to be like depressed and taking drugs. Like, this is actually what they do, so you shouldn't be relying on drugs for anything, because what it can do is kill you, and instead you should be seeking help and that kind of stuff. And it kind of does sound like a bit like of an old man rap, because he is pretty old, but I don't know, man. I think it's a very wise approach to look at this current issue that's kind of seeping into the hip-hop world, but not only that, but just youth in general. I mean, sure, I guess it's cool and rebellious to take a few drugs every now and then, but without knowing the actual effects and what they can do is really quite naive. Like, it's not as rebellious as you think when you actually don't know what they do to you. Now, either way he tackles the subject, honestly, I think he does it in such a well written way. Of course, it's Black Thought. He's always coming through with great lines and bars. And for the rest of the EP, he's essentially doing this similar thing with his passing of knowledge and wisdom onto younger people and people in the hip-hop game. Get Outlined, you know, here he's talking about how you know, like, it's hard out on the streets, you know, you've got to keep smart, because out in the ghettos and out in the streets and all that kind of stuff, you know, it's a pretty dangerous world. And perhaps it's not the most unique thing that any rapper has ever come out with, but I think when it comes from an older guy in the hip-hop game, it definitely comes from a more experienced place that I think is necessary, because he knows exactly what he's talking about and he words himself just masterfully as well. Just backed with this great production from Salaam as well, it just makes the EP so much more enjoyable, because you're not just focusing on the lyrics, you're focusing on everything. There's so much to take out of it. And in the midst of all this too, he does manage to find ways to throw in some braggadocious lines in a kind of classy and casual manner, like on History Unfolds, where he's talking about like how hip-hop has changed over the years. And sure, all genres do, so it might just sound a bit like of an old head or thing to say, like, oh, it's all like this now, it's gotten worse and all that kind of stuff. Oh. But I do like the way he comes in and is like, yeah, your raps are like emo, but mine are like this instead, and I'm writing history with my lyrics and you're all just kind of riding a wave and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's such like a cool and calculated brag. Like, it's not just mindless bragging, I'm better than you. You know, it's got a bit more meaning to it, and I just love the way he writes his bars. The closing track is Conception. This was actually a single leading up to this EP, and on this track his alter ego Reek Ruffin comes to play here. His alter ego is his singing part of Black Thought. Obviously he's a rapper, but Reek Ruffin is the singer who does the hooks and that kind of stuff. And on this track it's just more about like reflection on oneself and how you can kind of improve yourself, that kind of stuff. The track focuses on some religious imagery and themes. The idea of Immaculate Conception, which was about Mary being able to give birth to Jesus because she was free from sin. But Black Thought twists it around and says no one's conception is immaculate, meaning that nobody in the world is free from sin. So that whole idea of being free from sin is kind of bullshit to begin with. I just like the introspective lyricism on this track, where he's just focusing on where life can go from, you know, being in a tough situation and doing things that you didn't really want to do, and how you didn't really plan for things to turn out the way they did. Just again, his writing is fantastic, and I feel as though I don't need to keep telling you how good his writing is, because, you know, you should just know how good he is by listening to him. Yeah, for me, I really enjoyed this one way more than Volume 1 actually, so yeah, this is a really, really good EP. I could imagine when I come to my EP list, this will be on there. So I hope you have listened to this, and if you haven't, do it. Let me know your thoughts if you have heard it. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Have a good day. I won't score this EP because I never usually do with EPs, but believe me when I say it's a great one. Goodbye.